As you'll no doubt hear by the beating on the umbrellas, we are taking a beating. And facing electrocution. We're wet, the camera's wet. Do you know what? Even the fish are wet. It is a shocker. Mike's had a nice fish, about 8 pounds. We're desperate to get fishing, but we've got to see our way through this storm. It is unreal. The best of English weather you could ever get.
We've had a real big thunderstorm just now. We're in a bit of a break, and we're making the most of this break because I can see the next thunderstorm around the corner. And I've just hooked into a fairly nice carp. You can see by the bend in the rod, it's a decent carp. But they are feeding pretty well after that. I had a comment actually on YouTube the other day saying, do fish feed well in the rain? I think it's safe to say they do. They definitely do. Got fish feeding on the right as well by a bush. Just chucked a bit more bread out there. And one of them's going nuts out there. Oh, he's going a bit of snakes.
Digging this one now.
Yeah, he's woken up a bit. I can hear that thunder in the background still. Carp fishing in the storm. There's a nice common. I've got to go and get the net. There we go, he's in. Fish number 2 is in the net. Let's have a look at him. He's not going to set the world alight, guys, but beggars can't be choosers. We are fishing with bread on the surface. We're going to be a bit more selective with our fish now because you can get them feeding and you can see where the bigger ones are. But it fought well. We'll get him back and hopefully get some bigger ones.
Here we go. Go on.
Nice take.
Well, not a monster carp, guys, but a scrapper, as all carp here at Vale Farm really do go well, especially when you get them in close. Hold that rod down, digging away. Seen a couple of good fish here, but now the rain's starting to come again. So we're going to try and get this guy in. And we're going to try and pick up a bigger one if this rain does eventually give up. Oh, he's peeling me out. He's peeling me out. Good little scrappers. And of course, we have done, in case people like floater fishing like this, if you check out on our playlist, we've actually got one up there on catching these guys, wait for this, on a fly rod. It's unbelievable sport here at Vale Farm, definitely worth a go. Loads of action, and the owner was telling us that people come as far from London all the way down here just to do fly fishing for carp on this water. I wonder why. Come on. I'm gonna give up, for sure. Get in. Another common. And look how fat they are across the back. Chunky fish. It's in pretty good nick, this one. So there we go. Common carp on a day that we thought was going to end in disaster with the storms. A chub fishing trip has turned into a totally awesome carp trip. Okay, just a sort of a tip. You can catch them on a sliced bed, but the crust is not great. So you want what this one's called a crusty white split for some reason. Tin loaf. Now tin loaf obviously comes straight out of the tin and is unsliced. And the crust on this is all the way round. Inside is also fluffy. And what I tend to use are the pieces inside for loose feed like this, just chucking down in close, squeeze them a little bit harder. If you squeeze them too hard, squeeze this really, oh, I'll get this further, I'll throw it further, it will sink. Generally it will sink the way to the hook or pull it down. But use a piece of crust for the hook bait there, and use the fluff inside the fluffy bit for your loose feed. I'm pretty sure if you put enough of this in, depending on what these storms do, that we're going to get some taking close in here. Benefit of this is also, little tip, is if it does go quiet, it's ripply, and you think the fish are still there, they're swirling about, maybe the crust gets wet, and it will break up and sink eventually, crust, or you've struck bits off the hook and they're laying there and they sink, don't worry, the carp will still take things when they're sinking. Just get a bit of bread flake off the middle, squeeze it around the hook, mould it, cast it out in the same area, let it sink, but hold the line across your fingers. That's called touch ledgering, and you can also watch the line where it enters the water. That's really important, and you will see it pull tight, and you can honestly, you'll pick up extra fish that way. So if you do want to do slow sink flake, I'll show you how you hook it. The thunder is rumbling around, so let's get this out of the way, guys. I'm pretty sure that these fish will go down a bit deeper and I'm going to get one on bread flake. Piece of bread flake, I just put the bend of the hook in there like that. I do not squeeze it all around, I just fold it. Can you see that there? And the only bit I'm pinching is I just do one squeeze there and just pinch the bit around the eye of the hook. You don't want it moulded completely around the point of the hook, because it goes quite hard this in the water, and then you're striking, it'll just pop straight out of there like what we used to call a gobstopper when we were kids, a hard-boiled sweet. So there you go, that's ready to go. I'm going to swing it out when oh my God, there's a fish just here. There's a fish just right through, there's little bits in there. I'd be real surprised if that is not a candidate for slow sinking flake later on. I'll give this a go, see if we can't hook a fish for you.
Well, Graham's going slightly under the surface of the water with his method of fishing, but I'm going to go right on the top. And generally the bit that makes, the part of the bread that makes it float is usually the crust. It makes it a bit more buoyant. The way that I'm going to hook this, here's my bread flake, it's sort of about the width of your thumb really, just a sort of thumbnail sized piece. And I'm going to go through there's the thick hard part of the crust, the soft white part of the crust. I'm going to go through the thick hard part of the crust first, the actual bread crust, come through, then I turn it round, I go back through again, and as you can see the hook point is there, I just squeeze around that hook point with the softer white part of the bread, just to make it pinch there so that when I cast it doesn't fly off. But also I've left that as it is so that it will float.
There you go, really nice, pretty fish. Slow sinking flake. I've had two more. Do you know what? I think it's even better than the floating crust. So, a tip worth, trying is that, but you've got to watch the bow of the line, you've got to watch that tweak. Let's get him back. Well, there we go. That's not bad for a chub fishing session that we started out on. I think Mike's had 10 carp. I must have had about 7. He got a nice mirror to start with, and I finished up with this common carp on one loaf of bread that we paid £1 for. All we did was change venues, change tactics, and boy has it paid off. So, thanks for watching the Totally Awesome Fishing Show. Don't forget to watch our other channel, the Totally Awesome Outdoors Show. Subscribe, hit the button there, it's all free to watch, and we'll keep giving you as many fishing tips as we can.
Well, this is it. Last fish of the day for me, probably. We've actually run out of bread. That one loaf of bread has caught us over 20 fish. To a pretty decent size. This is one of the bigger ones of the bunch. Put up a great scrap. We've literally been here just a few hours, and that's the kind of fish you can get. And you know what? It only cost us £1. So at the moment Dad's over sea fishing in Ireland, so it's up to me to carry on with the bread fishing. Someone's got to do it. I'm heading back to Vale Farm. Weather is pretty mild, pretty warm, it's very dry. Hopefully the carp should be on the surface. It's ideal conditions really, it's not too glary. I've got my cap, got some Polaroids back in the back of the car. Shout out to G Fuel, one of our new sponsors. You guys can get discount 10% off G Fuel with the code AWESOME10. Everything you need to know is in the video description below. Let's go carp fishing. So I got back from that session, and although the conditions were pretty tough, I did manage to catch quite a few fish. They're not huge fish, but when you're surface fishing, generally you get the smaller fish that come up, and if you keep them feeding, the bigger fish will come up after that as they seal that activity. There's different ways that you can prepare your bait, and I'm just going to show you what I do. But on that session and the session previously with Dad, we just took the whole loaf of bread, took out that basically top section there, and just for loose feeding the bread we would take the inside fluffy white part, and then for our hook baits we would use the crust. But obviously that's quite big and bulky to put in your tackle bag and to take with you. So what you can do is you can prepare your bait at home, and I'll just show you what I do. Okay, so here's the loaf of bread. This one was I think 70p from the supermarket, so it doesn't cost you very much. But you've got lots and lots of hook baits that you can have here. So if you're at home and you've got your loaf of bread, first thing I tend to do is just cut off, be wary obviously using a sharp knife, but just saw off this end part here. This is going to be mostly hook baits, this part. So as you can see with this bit, you've got the hard, solid, crusty part on the outside and the white, fluffy stuff on the inside. All this part in here, this soft white stuff, is for your loose feed. Okay, so that you're using that to just throw out into the lake to get those carp feeding. But what you really want to do to prepare your hook baits is use this crust and use as much of it as possible so you can get as many hook baits as possible. So what I do next is I tend to cut along the bottom bit here, because that bottom bit is a good amount of hook baits there. So I'll try and cut it not too thin, because otherwise it's going to be hard to cast out. Usually about 1 inch to 3/4 of an inch thick. That's that crust. So I've taken the side crust, the bottom crust. I can also take off this end bit of the crust here. Again, not too thin. And obviously this side crust here, which I'll cut from the top end. Now the top part is quite curved, so it can be quite difficult to cut, but what I do is I cut all around the edges first, leave the top part, and then where the hard crust meets the soft white, that's basically going to be cut off there. So you're basically leaving the fluffy white part as just one big rectangular piece of bread. I'll show you what I do with that in a minute. Okay, as you can see, this is all the crust parts of the bread that I've got, and I've tried to keep them as neat as possible, because ideally we want basically a 1.5 inch by 1.5 inch square piece of bait, roughly. You can change different sized hook baits as well, depending on how finicky the carp are when you're casting bait out. If they're being really shy, then you probably go for a smaller piece of bait. So here's a really nice bit of the side of the loaf of the bread. There's the cross side, there's the soft white part. You can see how thick it is there compared to my finger. So all I do now with a pair of scissors is basically cut lengths of hook baits now. And again, like I say, you can change however thick you want your hook bait. You can change the shape. Here at Totally Awesome we tend to just use square pieces, and then you're just cutting your cubes. So out of that piece I've then got 4 hook baits there. As you can dunk that before you cast, so dunk it in the water just once and then you can cast out. If you dunk it more than once, generally the bait gets too soft to cast. But these are perfect sized hook baits. Well, I don't know if you can see this, guys, but there's actually, on this and on the counter down there, there's over 100 hook baits there. Now that's 79p. Those mathematicians out there, if you could work that out per hook bait, how much that costs, I can tell you now, it's cheap. You save money. All of those I can use, well, I could get through that many a day. I'd love to catch that many fish, but you will lose them. You know, you'll cast them on the hook, off the hook and things like that. Generally, once you've caught one fish on them, the bread just goes, it just comes off the hook. So you will need quite a few of those. But that's one loaf, and that lasted me easily throughout that session. I had lots left over. Now this is the soft white part on the inside of the bread. Generally not as good for your hook bait, but really good to loose feed. I'll show you how you can prepare it so that, you know, rather than taking this big chunk out with you in your tackle box, you can get it down to smallest pieces ready to throw out as soon as you're at the lake. Because at the end of the day, guys, it's all about saving time. A lot of us don't have much time to go fishing, so we need to have everything prepared generally the night before, maybe even a few days before if you're super keen. So all those minutes, those hours, all that work, it all counts so that you have the maximum amount of time on the bank. Let me show you what I do with this. Okay, so with the soft white loaf of the inside of the bread, now this is what I tend to do, is I don't cut it up too small, because obviously when you're throwing it out and you're feeding, you might need to get it further out in the lake when you're throwing it or using a catapult. So with what I've got left there, all I'll do is I'll halve it like that, halve it again, halve that again, and then one more time. So they're quite big chunks. Now I wouldn't throw those out, those whole chunks as they are, because they'll expand. Remember, when they go in the water they will expand, but that does give me the option of either freezing some, and or when I need to throw a certain amount out, perhaps a small amount, I can just take a pinch it a bit, not too much because it will sink, and then throw it out. Or say I wanted a bigger bit, I saw a fish cruising on the surface, then I just pull off maybe half of that or quarter of that, use a big bit, because it makes a bigger splash on the water, and carp, let's face it, they are attracted to that splash on the surface. So different ways you can adapt it. It's up to you guys, you can do it how you want really. Okay, so you've done all your hook baits, and let's say that you've gone fishing and you've got a load of hook baits left over. Now you can reuse those hook baits, however you will probably need to freeze them. You can obviously freeze bread. You'd need to probably get it out of the freezer the night before, maybe even a day before you go fishing, so that it defrosts in time. But all I do sometimes, put them in a Ziploc bag like that, keeps them sealed. Ideally with bread, you need to keep the oxygen away from it, keep it out of air. So the more sealed you can keep it, the better it will last. You can put this in the freezer, obviously try not to get any water or any liquid around it. Let it freeze, then when you want to go fishing, day before, get it out of the freezer, put it on the kitchen sink or something like that, let it defrost. Admittedly, they probably won't be as good as when they're fresh, but they will still be usable. Well, there you go guys, that's just how I prepare my bread for when I'm floater fishing. I hope you've enjoyed the video. That's just one of the ways and methods that you can use when fishing with bread. Obviously chub is another species that you can use bread for. You just squeeze it around the hook gently, cast it in, let it trot down the river just in front of a chub's nose, and generally you can get some really good chub fishing on it. There are other species as well that will take bread. I'm sure there's lots of you around the world that fish with bread. This is just how myself and Graeme have been fishing with it over the past few years. Well, if you're Graeme, 40 years. But it's great fun. Surface fishing is one of the best methods to catch carp because it's all visual. You see it there happening. Get out there guys, get a loaf of bread. It doesn't have to be expensive. Go really, really cheap. Prepare your baits, be prepared for your fishing sessions, and go and enjoy it. Now thanks for all of you who have subscribed to TA Fishing. If you're interested in some more kind of behind the scenes footage and monthly Q&A videos, then head over to our Patreon page. There's links in the description. Thanks for watching, guys.